Have you ever found yourself wondering, is there more to life than this? Like you followed all the steps. You found your dream job, your dream girl, maybe you even started a family, but you're still questioning, could life be more meaningful, more beautiful? Could I feel more alive? If so, then it might be time to connect with a deeper part of yourself, your soul. And luckily for you, I'm opening just a handful of one-on-one coaching spots to help you discover your soul's purpose and live a life in alignment with your truth. Because here's the issue. Many of us are living two lives. Our identity is split into two selves, the conditioned self and the true, authentic self. The conditioned self is the part of us that follows societal rules. It's easily influenced by parents, by friends, by partners, by the media, by culture, by religion, really anything outside of ourselves, and is often driven by the ego. The authentic self is the part of us that follows our soul. It's influenced by synchronicities and signs from the universe and is driven by love and serving the collective whole. My work is about helping you discover your authentic self by reconnecting you back to your soul. When you live a soul-led life and in alignment with your truth, you feel confident in your decisions because you're sure of who you are and what you're meant to do here in this lifetime. You feel in flow and at ease because you're using your God-given gifts and strengths in a way that feels good and serves the collective. It's coming from a place of love. You feel energized about life, curious about your potential, and excited about the endless possibilities that lie ahead. Life becomes deeply meaningful and profoundly magical. I know because I walked myself through this transformation just about a year ago, and now I would be so honored and grateful to help you do the same. If you're interested in exploring one-on-one soul purpose coaching with me, just book a discovery call in the link in the show notes. This is a no pressure call to simply explore if this type of work is aligned for you. Spots are filling up quickly, so don't hesitate. If you're curious, trust the calling. It's your soul. Hello, loves. It's just me, Emily. Welcome to my brand new podcast where we explore how to discover your soul's purpose, embody your essence, and to live a life in alignment with your truth. Today, I am joined by not just one, but three amazing guests who I have personally met in the community of grief and loss. And they are going to talk about kind of their own personal experience with surviving tragedy and how, if they feel like it actually guided them more into their true authentic self. So first off, we have Angela Griffith, who is a remarried widow, mother of three little babies, or kind of big kids now too. She's a yoga and meditation teacher, a sound healer, a dancer, and a homemaker from Northern California who draws her deepest healing and inspiration through living slowly in devotion to source, in deep reverence for and reconnection with the natural world. I brought Angela on today's episode because I have learned so much from her in terms of spiritual wisdom and even just her guiding us through a deep breath to begin this podcast episode today. She is just a well of knowledge in terms of spirituality and has also survived two different types of losses. Welcome, Angela.
Thank you. Honored to be here. Thank you, Emily.
Thank you. We also have Hope Edelman, who is an author, speaker, a certified life coach, and founder and CEO of motherlessdaughters.com. She has written 8 nonfiction books, including the bestsellers Motherless Daughters and Motherless Mothers, and her most recent book, The After Grief, Finding Your Way Along the Long Arc of Loss. Her books have been published in 17 countries and 11 languages and have sold more than 1 million copies. Hope also speaks at venues and conferences all over the world. She's appeared on TV, including Today, Good Morning America, and Good Morning Australia. As the founder and CEO of Motherless Daughters, she creates and leads online support groups, in-person retreats, webinars, and Mother's Day programs that reach thousands of women each year. I met Hope after reading her book, The After Grief, and it supported me so much on my grief journey. And I invited her on today's episode because she too has experienced different types of losses. And I'm so interested, Hope, to hear how these losses have really influenced your life and helped you remember the truth of who you are. So welcome to the show, Hope.
Thanks so much, Emily. It's so nice to be here. I really appreciate it and really looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you. And then we have Brandon Janous, who is another fellow widower, and father of 3. He's a serial entrepreneur and the author of Just Do. He is currently the co-founder of Blue Hat Publishing, and when he's not working on books or hanging with the kids, you'll find him golfing with his dad, traveling with anyone that's up for a trip, and searching the world for the best taco spots. Brandon and I connected through our shared loss. We have very similar stories, losing the love of our life to cancer. And we've just connected offline about the realities of being a widow and a solo parent to 3 kids for you, 2 for me. So welcome to the show, Brandon.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I feel out of my league. The credentials of everybody else are like all these great credentials, and then there's Brandon. But it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Love it, Brandon. If anyone wants to go check out Brandon's amazing social media feed too, I'd say their credentials are right there, Brandon. Your story is so beautiful and you've touched so many lives with your story of loss. So thank you for being here. All right, you guys, well, let's dive in. The first question I want to ask you is, what masks do you think you wear? And then when you take them off, what do you look like? What do other people actually see? So I'd love it if you would want to kick us off with this one.
I was just thinking, wouldn't it be nice to have time to think about this while the others are talking? You're going to get me right off the cuff. What masks do I wear? You know, I've been doing this work for so long, 30 years since my first book came out, that I think I have a public persona, like we all do, and that's only amplified by social media, but mine began before that point. And then a really private persona. So I guess, my public persona is my mask, which is being out there as the expert. And I'm seen that way as, an authority on a topic. And I'm aware that 30 years of research and experience and working in the early parent loss field, which is what I really do. I work with historical loss, which is still a really untapped niche in the bereavement field. Adults who experienced a big loss when they were children, adolescents, or young adults, and how that shows up later in life in really predictable ways at extremely predictable times. And a lot of therapists don't know about that. So that is my public persona, and I can flip the switch and do a podcast and do an interview. And I go out in the world and I'm seen a certain way. And for, commercial purposes, I wear that mask gratefully, and I wear it joyfully. And then I come home and I take it off, and I'm just a regular person who is as insecure as anybody else on the street, who has moments of great joy and moments of deep sadness and loneliness like everybody. And I spend half a day in my pajamas in front of a computer or my yoga clothes. And I guess I'm as normal or ordinary as anyone else. And scared, about the things that people are scared about these days in the world right now. And I guess so I bounce back and forth between the public and the private. And social media in my private life is really difficult for me lately because of the degree of self-promotion and the superficial contacts. And my work is so much about, seeing each other's essential selves and creating intentional spaces and designing experiences so that people can take off their masks in community.
Yeah.
But then in order to bring them into that place, I have to really tap into the public persona. So I think that's something I'm still trying to navigate and figure out. So if any of you understand that, because I see heads nodding on the screen, and if you've got any, insights, I'm all ears today and willing to share whatever I can as well.
I love that. Yeah. And I think that the more that for me, what that's looked like is like recognizing that our purpose and who we are on the outside and that mask is a natural extension of who we are behind the mask as well. But it's so hard to actually trust yourself and believe that. So I love that, Hope. Thank you for that reflection. Who wants to share next? What mask do you wear? Brandon, let's try you. And what do people see when they take it off?
Yeah, man. Hope, that was so good. Thank you for sharing that. I can relate in some way, shapes, and forms of what you're talking about. Obviously not. I was not on Good Morning America this morning or any mornings. I've never been invited, but so my personality is not quite that known. But for me, I think the mask is the mask of having it all together, the mask of perfectionism, the mask of look at him go. Look at him go. Look, he does it. A single dad, lost his person. He's killing it. When, man, I take it off and it's a struggle.
Yeah.
It's a grind. It is real. But you know what I love? I love mask off Brandon so much more than mask on Brandon. I love the vulnerability that comes with it. I love the grace that comes with it. I love the fact that I can admit that I suck. I love at times I love that, I can ask for forgiveness from my children and my people when I'm not the best friend or the best person or the best human or the best coworker, whatever it may be. But man, so many people, I'm sure, look at all of us like, man, they've got it. They got this platform. They got it together. They write beautifully, whatever it may be, they dance beautifully. If you're in the case of Angela, that's not me. Whoever it may be doing that thing, but man, I love mask off Brandon, because those are the ones that, and I think my people are the ones that know mask off Brandon, and the ones that I really care about know the mask off Brandon, and that's I miss having to put a mask on. I don't love putting a mask on, I guess is what I'm saying. I wish I could just be me, but sometimes, to your point, Hope, like you have to be this person, you have to be this character almost. Not that it's fake, because I do also think it helps and it encourages and it opens up doors for people and it helps people heal. But
Yeah.
I am a human that struggles so much with so many things, and I try to share that openly on social media, because, man, anyone that's not going through a hard right now or just went through a hard is probably heading into a hard, whether they want to admit it or not. And I just want to be able to mask off and say, hey, I'm here. I'm your friend. I'm going to hold space with you. And I'm going to cry with you, and I'm going to hurt with you, and all the things that come with that. So mask on, perfection, got it all together, mask off much more often. Just I struggle. It's hard. Every day's tough, but man, there's so much good too.
Right.
And I like sharing both. I like talking about both.
I so relate to that, Brandon. I'm just thinking that, the mask on Hope is the one that inspires people to say, you're so strong. You got this. Like, you're an inspiration. And the mask off Hope is the one who, has, like everyone, deep moments of feeling not strong at all and feeling weak and scared and just thinking, I'm just going to do the next right thing to get to the next moment, like everybody else. So yeah, thank you for sharing that and for being so honest. But the mask off is the vulnerable self, right? The mask on is the one who has to sort of like soldier up and go out in the world without our.
Yeah. I'm so uninterested these days in the mask on. It's like, I just want to see the mask off. And I feel like social media has this capacity to like pedestalize people even in the grief space, and it's like, especially in the grief space, like, oh, this person's got it figured out. And it's like, we're all human. We're all just figuring this thing out. And when people take their masks off, which I think, both of you do well, that's what people connect with more. That's the medicine. Like, that's the beauty. We don't need the mask on. We can't relate to the mask on, like, that's not what's going to help people heal. It's when we say, hey guys, I'm just figuring this out too. I don't know. I don't know what's next, but this has worked.
Yeah.
This is helping me. So I really appreciate you sharing that, Brandon. Like, I think we all struggle with that, like, balance of like, when am I on and when am I off? And when we can just like kind of try to eliminate that as much as possible and just show up as authentically as possible, as hard as that can be to do. That's where the real healing takes place. Cause I don't know, I find it, especially these days, so much easier to relate to somebody who's just like, hey, here I am, like, this is it. And sometimes it's spot on and it feels really in flow and I feel like I've got it. And other times it's all crumbling. And isn't that just what this human journey is? Isn't that it? Grief really highlights that for all of us, I think. We're all just messy, chaotic humans trying to figure this whole thing out. I guess I'll go next. So, we all wear masks, as we've all said. And I've always been this like fairy soul, this like super artistic, creative, sensitive, deeply feeling, mystical soul. And like, that's not very popular in our world. Not a lot of people like that human. That's not what's celebrated in our world. What's celebrated is the person who's doing and constantly creating and coming out with the next program and doing this and, achieving. And that's beautiful, right? There's nothing wrong with that. That's absolutely fabulous. But I was more designed to wander through the forest and like, and look at the flowers and take things slowly and create and just be in this quiet place of contemplation. And growing up, I learned that was not acceptable. That was not what was celebrated. I was definitely never first pick for dodgeball and PE. That was not, people didn't like that. So I had to learn how to cover that up. And that was just survival, right? Like, we're all just trying to survive. We're all just trying to be accepted and fit into the herd and do what's right, especially at a young age. And grief really like propelled me further into that other realm of like, you're different. Your peers don't understand you. They haven't gone through something like this. So it just really isolated me even further and took me deeper into that realm of other. Made me feel like an alien, as I'm sure it did for most of us when we were going through that. And in that space of isolation, I had to really learn to befriend the deeper parts of myself, and to come to terms with, this is who I am. And like, not everyone's going to vibe with it. Not everyone's going to understand my grief experience. Not everyone's going to understand me as a human. And that's okay. And that's been a very like painful, arduous, long process of unlearning and unraveling. But the deeper I go, the more peace and acceptance I find within myself. And it's still a process. Like, we're still working on it, as always. But I do find that grief has this capacity to like pull us into ourselves in a way, like pull us into this cocoon. That cocoon that feels like a tomb, right? When we're in it, is actually the womb of where we're being reborn into really not, I wouldn't say the new version of ourselves, but really like our truer selves. And grief is like this horrible thing we go through, but also this great permission slip ultimately when you can like zoom out and look at it of like, I am becoming who I am, whether people understand it or not. So I probably wear less masks now than I did growing up. But yeah, the human tendency to like dim our light or to fit in or put on a certain role in certain situations, I think will always be there to a certain extent. But now I have more of the capacity to check myself and go like, girl, that's not you. Like, it's okay to just show up in this moment as yourself. And those who vibe with your message are your people, the people who are ready for it will receive it, and those who don't won't. And that's okay. And there's nothing wrong or right about any of it, if that makes sense, you know?
Yeah, I think what's coming up for me after hearing all of your reflections is just like we learn to wear a mask as a means to fit in, to feel safe, to feel worthy. And then as we kind of grow up, as we evolve, whether it's through loss or another type of major life event, it starts to kind of dissolve and we feel a little bit more comfortable in our own skin. And so that really does bring me into our next question, which is, how do each of your respective losses, how do you feel like they have changed you? If you could kind of imagine the person who you were before, and then after, what were like the major shifts that you've seen? And I know you guys have a couple different types. Some of like Hope and Angela, I know you guys have different losses and divorces of loss I want to talk about here too. So whoever feels called to share first, go for it.
I'll go because we can just maybe stay in the same order, if that's helpful.
Yeah.
You know, my first big loss came at 17, and when my mother died of cancer. And it was a predictable loss. She was deteriorating for over a year and a half, but sudden for the 3 children in the family because we didn't know how sick she was or that she was going to die. So it was a confusing time that I've realized through EMDR as an adult completely reset my nervous system. So who would I be if my mother hadn't died? I can't tell you. I think I was on a path of development because my brain was still developing, my nervous system was developing, everything about me was emerging at that time. And I feel like it derailed me off that path and sent not entirely. The way that I talk about it with my clients at retreats and in one-on-one coaching and support groups is this feeling of having suddenly a 2-track life where I was moving along in a certain direction until the age of 17. I was about to become a senior in high school. She died in the summer. And then a big piece of me derailed. And then I was suddenly on 2 tracks. And on one track, I was moving along with my peer group. I was graduating from high school. I was going to college. I was getting a job. You know, eventually I got married. I had 2 daughters. And I was doing all of that really in lockstep with many of my friends. And then this other part of me was developing in the context of this dramatic loss and a family that didn't talk about grief. And there was no grief support at that time in my community in the 1980s. And so that piece of me developed coping strategies and mechanisms to get through the trauma and the adjustments and carried those along with the rest of me. And this piece of me often felt out of sync with the other part and really isolated and lonely, which is something that survivors of early parent loss and often early sibling loss often feel. And it wasn't until my 20s when I started working on my first book and I met all these other women who were also living this way and understood this second track that I felt like I found my people and they sort of came closer together. You know, they weren't as far apart anymore. So I can't tell you who I would have been if I hadn't experienced that big loss. I lost my dad also when I was in my 40s. It was a very different experience to go through it as an adult. And I do feel very much like I didn't think it changed the course of my adult life as much, but it opened me up in a way because it was such a different loss than my mom. His children were with him. We were communicating. I feel like it broke me open in a really beautiful way to be able to walk him to the end of his life and say goodbye and resolve open issues. So that, I think, made me a more feeling person and a more compassionate person. And I could really understand the beauty that came with sorrow in a way. I think a lot about Stephen Colbert in his interview with Anderson Cooper, that moment where he says that he had to learn to love the thing he most wishes had not happened. I think about that about 3 times a day ever since watching that interview, and how that is, to me, such a valuable and worthy goal. And sometimes I think I'm closer to it than others. But then my next big loss occurred 5 years ago when I went through a very unexpected separation that led to a divorce. And my life is so different now than it was 5 years ago. It'll be 5 years in February. I went through a divorce and the pandemic and empty nesting all in a 6-month period. And that brought me to my knees and ultimately allowed me to rise to become, I think, the person that I really was meant to be and didn't let myself be. I'm not going to say couldn't be. Oops, sorry, my earbud just fell out. But, and I can talk about that more for you, Emily. I don't want to take up all the time here.
Yeah.
But I think that was a very transformational experience that I can articulate in a way that I can't articulate my very early loss, because it was happening at such a formative time. It feels like it changed everything, but I don't know where it would have led me otherwise.
Yeah, that makes total sense, because as a 17-year-old, your sense of self and identity is still very much forming. And so it's just, yeah, I mean, that event absolutely sent you on an entirely different trajectory.
And learning how to cope with the pain and the existential crisis and the awe and the wonder of the death of someone who is so essential to your survival at such an early age exposes you to a worldview that you wouldn't normally be exposed to at such a young age. And that gets folded right into your developing personality. It really feels like it becomes part of who you are. And if it's a traumatic loss, then that gets folded into your personality too, and has to be very carefully and safely undone later, I think, to get back to the person that you were before.
Girl, we need to talk about like my daughter, and we're going to set up a whole other call.
I'm here for it.
Because
I'm here
I
for
so feel that.
Yeah.
So feel that for her. Yeah. I can like feel the emotion there.
Me too.
Witnessing you and all of the losses you've walked yourself through. And yes, I want to dive into more of the identity piece with the divorce in a moment, but I'd love to hear, Brandon, how has it changed you?
Yeah, that's first of all, Hope and Angela need their own podcast with you, because there's too many things we need to talk about in here, like for all three of us to get this in, because it's just so good. I could sit back and listen to all of this. So mine was a little bit different, but all of us have different stories. And my wife got diagnosed with cancer when we had been married just under about 8 years. And so we had 3 children. At the time, they were 4, 7, 4, 6, and 8. And so we had 3 little ones that had to watch their mom die. That's something that you don't think about when you're standing at the altar, because you plan on spending the rest of your life with that person. And then, not to get into the story, but she got better for a minute, but then it got worse pretty quickly. And it got to the point where we knew medically there was nothing that could save Rach. But Rach was the most selfless human on the planet. And so she spent every moment of her life that she had left making sure we were okay, making sure that people were in our lives to help do the things that daddy's not good at, like hair appointments. My girl probably would have never gotten a haircut. I didn't know that. I thought it was supposed to be long. It just kept growing, but turns out you need to maintain that stuff. But it's something I didn't do. So Rachel had set up hair appointments after she died. She had doctor's appointments. She had dentist appointments. She had all these things set into place. so I wouldn't have to think about them. She brought people into our lives to hold space in different seasons and different things to make sure that the girls would be prepared for this, and the guy and Macklin would be prepared for just things that only a mom can do. And so it should have been a lot harder than it was, that transition. But Rachel was so selfless in the fact that she allowed me to almost look like I had it together because of her. It had nothing to do with me, but she just did everything she could to make it, the transition, not as hard as it should have been. But like you hope, COVID came. COVID came 13 days after Rachel died, which none of us, well, we sure didn't see coming. Rachel didn't even know it existed. But there's so many blessings in that too. You know, I hate to say COVID was a blessing to anyone because I know how hard it was for everyone. But one, the fact that Rachel passed away before hospital shut down, you know, so we got to be there. We got to spend, I spent 39 nights, Rachel's last 39 nights in the hospital with her. The kids came every day, got to be with their mommy. People came from all over the world to say goodbye to Rachel. But it was a happy thing. Rachel was loving on them. Rachel was encouraging. Rachel was witnessing to them. Rachel was ministering to them. It was just such an incredible scene that I got to witness. And I don't know how I would have taken, no, you can't go see her. No one's allowed to go see her, which I know a lot of our community has had to walk through during that year or two of COVID shutting things down. So that, and then number two, you know, 13 days after Rachel died, school shut down. And so all of us were lost, not just Brandon, who just lost his wife. We were all like, how do I do this? How do I walk through this thing? Like, you know, and so y'all were all as lost as me. I just had this big loss that I was dealing with too, right? And so, man, me and my kids got to figure it out together. We got to walk it together. I got to learn how to do the day to day. You know, that was the one thing I remember longing for, is like, what's the new normal? What's it look like without Rachel? Because I'm not good at a lot of things, right? And you don't realize what you have till you don't have it anymore. And, you know, I always say this, like, become a noticer. Look at the people around you and all that they do and all that they help with and all that they support with and all the things. Like, Rachel was gone and things stopped getting done, right? You know, that she did all the things. And COVID allowed me this space just to learn how to do it, us to create our new norm. And again, far from perfectly, a lot of mistakes. I had to learn how to clean up vomit. I never did that. That was Rachel's thing. She was good at that. I dry heave when I do it, right? Head lice came like 2 weeks in, like head lice during COVID. No one would treat my kids. So it's just like lice like all these things that you're just, I remember thinking, Rachel, what are you doing? Like, you don't have to do all this right now to me. But it was, we just learned to walk through it and figure it out. And it was ugly. And there was a lot of days crying on my closet floor, you know, just closing the door and just releasing, like, how am I going to figure this out? But you know what we do? We figure it out. You know, as hard as it is and as big of a struggle as it may be, we get to the other side of it and we figured out head life. We figured out puke and we figured out all the things that came along with that. I am a much better, to answer the question, I'm a much better human today because of what Rachel taught me, because of the lessons I learned while being married to her, because of the lessons she left me with. We had a last date in the hospital where Rachel had 8 things from me that she wanted going forward. And one of those things, as selfless as Rachel was, like, you need to move on. You need to find love again. You know, like giving me that permission, and not just me, but her parent, the community, so they couldn't judge me for maybe dating again one day, right? For Rachel to say, you need to move on, not in 2 weeks. That'd be weird, she said. But you know, in due time, you don't need to do this alone. You don't. We're supposed to have a partner. You need a partner. You need someone. You have a lot of love left to give. You have a lot of life left to live. So that just giving me permission to go do life without her was such a blessing. And so I don't feel the guilt for doing things without her. It's hard. It's hard. My daughter's dance competition last week was really hard without Rachel. Rachel was a dancer. That was their thing. Being the dance dad is not what I'm good at. So it's still hard, but I don't ever feel guilt because I have the permission, which we all should. whether we lost our person suddenly, whether we lost our person like Emily or I did. But my person giving me the permission to live and to love and to be happy and to be okay is the biggest gift I could have gotten. So I am better today because of that.
Absolutely, Brandon. And so like I witnessing you in your loss as well. And Rachel sounds like such an angel. And just hearing the, just to really like solidify this in something like resilience, expanding our capacity for what we thought was possible for ourselves in terms of a change. And Angela, I'm going to shift the question just a little bit because I have so many topics I want to cover with you guys. So in terms of the different ways that we've changed, I really want to get specific around identity loss. How did you experience loss of identity in both of your losses, and how so?
First off, there's Brandon, Rachel, just wow, what an incredible human. I mean, I can just like feel her spirit with the way you speak about her, and whew, wow, just what a beautiful gift to the world.
Thank you.
She
is. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah. I really feel that. So moved by that. So thank you for sharing. Identity loss. Yeah. I mean, wow. Whew, that's a whole podcast episode in itself. I feel like it's so common for grievers when we experience a traumatic loss. I didn't know up from down. I didn't know who I was without this person. I have two big losses. I lost my husband, Patrick, at 35 to gun violence. And I lost at 25. Prior to that, I went through a very traumatic divorce. It wasn't technically a divorce. He very unexpectedly left me a month before the altar. There was no warning sign. So I really experienced that as a death because there was just no preparation for it. I know that sounds there had to be signs. There wasn't. There's actually a term called abandoned wife syndrome. I'm sure it happens too with husbands, but where somebody just like switches a flip and flips a switch, whatever the phrase is, and leaves. And so I very much experienced that as a death. And all my hopes and dreams completely gone. There was no future that I had planned for, was no longer there. And I was caught in a very deep, very scary, dark place for a very long time. That particular first loss, because it was my first experience with a traumatic loss, like losing my husband to gun violence was like, when we zoom out, so much worse, right? But like at the time, at 25, experiencing the death of that relationship out of nowhere and the death of those plans in my future and the person I was supposed to have babies with and the person that I was supposed to spend my life with was so devastating beyond belief. This person who I thought I knew so well, it turned out to be someone completely different, was shocking on every level. It made me completely lose faith in myself. It made me lose faith in the universe for a very long time. I was so angry with God. I was so confused. I was like, how could this happen to me? How? And I think so many of us experience that, that feeling of like distrust in life and in the universe and in God, or maybe, for people that don't have spiritual beliefs, they're like, yeah, there is no God, right? Like I can see how people go to that place. For me, I just felt very betrayed and victimized, right? And I really went into like that victimization, and went deep and dark into it. I completely lost my sense of self. And I realized through that process, through many years of what I call the dark ages, the dark ages of Angela's life, so much of that identity loss wasn't necessarily from him leaving. It was a lot of deep, unresolved childhood trauma that really was pulled to the surface from him leaving. I was a child of divorce. My father left us very young. and moved to Europe. He wasn't in me and my brother's life very much. So I didn't have that mirror from a father figure that we expect to have growing up, right? And on top of it, there was like a rejection from him. It wasn't like he died, which would be a whole other trauma in another way. It was he didn't choose me, and so I had to re-experience that betrayal from my own father through my partner leaving and not choosing me. This person that I've deeply felt that our love and our bond was unconditional, right? Like as you assume and hope in the person that you are going to spend the rest of your life with. Right? We all hope that that's we have faith and trust that partner feels that. That's why we commit to life with them. That's the whole thing. So I had to really find a home within myself, which I had never done. I went from being raised by my mother and then having relationships. I'd never been alone before. And it was the first time that I had to do this whole life thing on my own and figure out who the hell I was and who was I without him. And to not have that worthiness and that validation mirrored back to me from another, which is what I had always relied on to fill the void, going back to childhood wounding from not having it from my family of origin. And within that process, what I found was that I am enough on my own. I actually don't need another person to mirror that back to me, but I had to go to the deepest, darkest pits of loneliness and despair to find that. And within that, there was a lot of going back and forth with God, a lot of like, I don't know why you're doing this to me. I don't know why this is happening, and I was pissed, like truly pissed. But through that process, I realized that I don't know what's going on here. Like, who am I to think that I know my life plan? Who am I to think that I have any control over any of this and that I somehow know best? Like, how ridiculous is that actually? And so within that process, at some point, I just had to like let go and surrender my, illusion of control and just be like, all right, like, just take the wheel. Just, I trust you. Just whatever is supposed to happen here, just okay. And it was in that place of acceptance of like, that life's not happening. And I don't know what the future holds, but like, whatever this is, you need to let go and you need to just trust. And when you do that, something will shift. I don't know what, but something will shift. And that surrender and that trust and that acceptance within that place of uncertainty was what caused the eventual little glimpses of peace and healing to shine through. Like that sitting in the discomfort allowed the transformation to eventually take place. But that was really what I had to do. It's like, you just need to be uncomfortable here and not be okay with it, but accept it.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
So what I'm kind of hearing is your losses both really invited you into the depths of darkness. To kind of strip away all the layers, heal the old wounds, and to tap into the version of Angela that we get to see here today.
Absolutely. I think we assume that the darkness is like killing us on some level, like it's going to overtake us. But like, that's the fertile void, right? In that space is where we actually are becoming our true self. We are becoming who we came to be here. And if we cannot sit in that space of discomfort, we're either going to remain stuck or we're going to devolve, right? We're going to like actually like close up and harden our heart and not allow for the mystery to unfold.
Yeah. I love that, Angela. And I absolutely echo that. And I know we've been on a similar spiritual path. I want to hear perspective from Hope and Brandon in terms of, do you feel like your loss has invited you into a remembrance of who you really are or who you were meant to be?
I'm really struck by, Angela, what you were saying about how experiencing what's called a relational trauma in your mid-20s sent you back to process that earlier relational trauma you had when your dad left. And that's completely, completely natural for that to happen. And when I talk about, understanding the beauty that comes with the sorrow, I think, my gosh, what a gift for you to be able to do that at 25 and process that so that that's not there for the whole rest of your life. Yeah, to do that work at that time, as devastating as it sounds like it was. You were like thrown into the crucible of all that early trauma and you emerged from it differently. So I'm really moved by that. Thank you so much for sharing that. I don't know that I can answer that. Certainly, again, my childhood loss was so different from adult losses that you others have experienced. So I'll just talk about divorce grief. And I feel like I'm still an unreliable narrator because, as you probably know, like you develop a story of what happened and how it happened and why it happened and what it means. And it takes time to do that. So I think I'm still in that process,
and the story changes like
all the time. That's why I feel like an unreliable narrator of my own adult history. And to Angela's point, when you experience the end of a relationship so unexpectedly and you didn't know it was coming, it throws you into a state where you're questioning your own reality, like what was real and what wasn't. And it was real to me, but if it wasn't real to this other person, what does that mean? And what did I miss? And, so that takes a while. That you go, if you are willing and give yourself permission and you're ready to go to that place to really excavate. And I think from there, you discover a lot about who you are. But just the other day, I was looking for a journal to write in to start a new journaling practice. And I found one that had, maybe only 15 or 20 pages in it that had been used. And I was writing during lockdown because my separation occurred 3 weeks before lockdown. So I didn't have access to my usual support networks, the girlfriends who would have flown in to stay with me, et cetera. So I was journaling and I found a passage there where I was writing about this, Emily, to your point, and saying, I feel like now I have the space and can give myself permission to go back to who I was in my 20s before this. And I was so happy and so relieved to discover that person still existed. That person who had a sense of spontaneity and and could explore interests or did explore interests. There was a lightness to me, which is not to say that being a wife and mother was heavy. It was full of so much happiness, and I'm grateful for all of those years. But it was the shedding of those responsibilities to other people, to go back to a time when I was accountable mainly to myself and was able to explore in ways that I had diverted for the greater good of the family unit and did so willingly and consciously and joyfully. But it brought me like full circle. And I had my best friend from college went through a divorce at roughly the same time. And suddenly we were like 19-year-olds dating again after a period of time. And it was remarkable to go back to that time in our lives together with so much experience and different insight. And dare I call it some form of wisdom it was like getting a redo in a sense, except with all of what I wish I'd known then, having it now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And what I love about this reflection, Hope, is, even motherhood and going into that portal, it's like the death of being single and having that autonomy and freedom. And as you focus, on your kids and the family, and then in your kids leaving, it's like the death of being a mom, or at least in that capacity.
Yeah.
These are all metaphorical deaths. And it brings you back into that more free spirited version of self. So you can kind of see how
And
it's just like a cycle that goes over and over.
the identity shifts that come with that, right? I mean,
Massive.
going from being a wife to being single to then eventually years later becoming someone's girlfriend or partner, being a full-time mom to being a single mom, and then being a part-time, very part-time mom. My children are in their 20s now and very independent. And so all of those shifts, even, going from being a homeowner to selling the house and after the divorce, and all of those shifts and identity, shifts happening at, very close together creates, and then you think, well, what will emerge from that? And I think it, a lot of, if you're lucky and you're able to allow it, I think what emerges is your essential self, your authentic self.
Yes.
That's it. I have a friend who's a blues singer, and we joked that he was going to write a song for me called Stripped to the Studs, because that's what it felt like. Like everything, all my attachments, if you think of it, in the spiritual sense, all my attachments were being shed by choice or by circumstance. I had a friend who said, my God, you are being asked to let go of all of your attachments at once, aren't you? And I said, yes, actually, now that you frame it that way, that's what it feels like. But in the end, when you have to let go of all your attachments, the identity attachments, what you realize is that you need to let go of the concept of attachment itself. And that's when you surrender to that, I think, is when you can find peace, or at least that's what I did. When I realized everything here is temporary, everything is impermanent, and that is not something to be frightened of. That's actually something to embrace, because it allows us to really love and enjoy what we have right now.
I couldn't agree more. The letting go.
Mic drop.
I know, seriously, just like the constant shedding and letting go to allow what feels more true and aligned to come through. Brandon, I want to hear from you really quick. And then I have one more question, but we'll see if we have time. Do you feel like your loss has kind of initiated you into a truer form of your essence? What was the word you used, Hope? It was the essential you.
Yeah. So thank you for repeating the question, because I forgot to. Like, I'm a listener right now, and I'm listening and learning. But man, that's a really good question. I think before Rachel died, having a partner allowed me to be other things. It allowed me to be a boss. It allowed me to be a leader. It allowed me to be many, many, many other things, right? A speaker, all these things. And once Rachel died, I became dad or daddy. Like, that's literally my role. That's who I am. It's my favorite role. It's my favorite name in the world. It's what I love being. And, prior to Rachel getting sick, I was very absent. I traveled all the time. I was speaking to large organizations on leadership and culture and team building. And, I had found my space, right? And it was going well. And we were making good money, and I was providing, and I was doing the things that I thought the man was supposed to do, until Rachel called me many a time. She called me out on it, but there was one final time where she said, look, I'm never going to leave you. This isn't what I signed up for. She's mom, raising 3 kids under 5 on her own. I'm on the road all the time, thinking I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And I didn't know what the solution was, but in true Rachel fashion, she had a solution. It was, we're going to pack all of our stuff up and move into a motorhome, and we're going to go with you everywhere you go for the next year. And that's what we did. And it became the biggest blessing in the entire world, because it taught me so much about perspective. It taught me about presence. It taught me about what really matters in life. And having that year of 40 feet where there's nowhere to go, there's nowhere to hide, you're doing your webinars and you're doing your calls and you're doing your meetings, and you have 5-year-old and 4-year-old, 2-year-old running around behind you. You're changing diapers in the middle of conference calls. You're doing all the things. It just taught me how to be in the season I'm in now, where the kids are going to come home. Sorry, I can't change it. They might come in and distract me. Sorry, guys, that's what it's going to be. They're a little older now, so I have a little bit more say and control over them. But I'm so grateful for that year of Rachel and my children being able to teach me what really matters in life. That right after we got out of the RV, she got diagnosed, and then it was the year of like 2 years of survival. Like when nothing matters but living, perspective changes. Like I don't think we had a disagreement in 2 years, because like, what matters? Like all the things that we argue about, all the things that we disagree about, all the things that we fight about, all the things that we stress about, when literally for 2 years, it was like, okay, how are we going to survive tomorrow? How are we going to get better? What are we going to do? Like on the same freaking path to live, right? None of the other stuff matters. And all that to say, I kind of got on a tangent there, but once she passed away, my identity was dad. That's all that mattered to me. That's all I cared about. That's all that was important. That's all that I needed to be. And the hardest thing, I always say this, there was a lot of hards, cleaning up puke, doing lice. But the hardest thing for me was Rachel always allowed me to be the good cop. And when she died, I had to be both. And I know y'all can experience this where you feel like, man, I was just the bad cop all day today. I said no all day. And like I always got to be the good. And so that's something I still struggle with. Like doing it alone is not fun because I want to be the good cop all the time, right? I don't want to be the bad cop, but it's my identity as dad, and that's enough for me.
Yeah, I love what you said about your whole perspective changes and your loss really helps you see what actually matters. And also it sounds like that trip did as well, to kind of dial in on like, okay, well, who do I want to be now? So we are almost at our time. It sounds like, Brandon, your truth is dad. And in a couple of words, Angela, and in a couple of words, Hope, what is your truth?
I would say my truth is to treat every day as sacred. Just that's really it. Like everything is a miracle. Life is a miracle. Tomorrow really is not promised. It really isn't. Later today isn't promised. Like even the shit storms are blessings because there is growth to be had there. So just bless it all and don't do things to fit into other people's narratives of what you should do. Don't try to fit the societal mold. If it's not for you, don't do it. Just do you and live your medicine, be in your truth and love that. And anyone who doesn't vibe with it, all good. They're not wrong. You're not right. Vice versa. Just do your thing and love all people and be compassionate. We're all just doing our best,
I love that.
That's it. I think that's really it.
I love it. Hope.
I think my truth is to always strive for honesty now with myself and others in a compassionate and gentle way. And I have a friend who, when I talk with her sometimes about not knowing how to respond or react to something, she has given me the guideline that I now rely on, which is, what would love do? And I stop sometimes, instead of being reactive, and I just pause and I think, what would love do in this situation? And I try to do that.
Amen. I love that. I have similar process. Did you have anything you wanted to add, Brandon, to your truth?
No, you stole mine. So that was but that's what Rachel taught us all that love does. It just shows up. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't look for an invitation. It just shows up. And what a society we would be if we just showed up and didn't expect anything in return, weren't looking for a thank you, weren't looking for a post, weren't looking for recognition. We're just showing up because that's what love does. And so I think if we could all be a little bit better at showing up for people. Again, not looking for permission. And so love shows up in so many different ways. It doesn't have to be extravagant. It doesn't have to be beautiful. It just has to do. You just need to do. And that's what I teach my kids every day. Just show up for people. Show up for the people that, especially the unloved, the ones that are sitting alone at lunch, the ones that don't have anyone to talk to on the bus. Show up for the people that are unloved, because you may be the only love they get in an entire week. And so, and y'all all do that so well. So thank y'all. It's been great to be able to connect with y'all and watch the way you guys are living and loving.
Thank you, Emily, so much for creating this space and introducing us to each other.
I know.
I love it.
God, such a blessing.
Feels divine. Well, thank each of you for sharing all of your wisdom, your insights, and your love here in this space. I wish we had a whole nother hour to talk, because I have so many things I want to ask you, and I hope to have you guys on the show individually as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Emily. Proud of you.
You.
Thank you so much for listening in to It's Just Me, Emily. I hope that you enjoyed the show. If you did, it would be a great honor if you could subscribe and then leave a review. And if you do so, I will send you a beautiful hardback copy of my book, Love and Grief, to the first 20 people who subscribe and leave a review. When you do that, it just helps my podcast get boosted and more people will be able to come in and view the show. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I hope to see you in another episode.